Hello, good afternoon to everybody. So we are starting now a panel discussion here on a really critically important issue for COP30, that is net zero at COP30. And the panel is visualizing net zero economies to inform actions. So the point is, there is no most important issue here at COP than to know how to achieve net zero for different countries, for different economies, and for the good of the society as a whole. So basically, this is the main issue on this panel. We will have four important panelists. First, Eric Larson, that's professor from Princeton University. We have Ajay Mathur, professor of IIT Delhi. We will have David Sai from Instituto de Energia e Meio Ambiente. And you have Professor Tiandu Peng from Tsinghua University. So basically, we will have an initial discussion, followed by some moderators, and then we open the discussion for the whole public. So basically, Eric is recommending that if you want, you can use these fonts because it could improve because it's too noisy here. But anyway, so I will pass straight the word for Eric for his presentation.
Hey. Thank you very much, Paulo. Can people hear me? It's okay. You can use this if you want to hear better. I'll stand up. Can we start the slides? So my name is Eric Larson, and I, with colleagues at Princeton University a few years ago, I led a big study called Net Zero America, which was quite impactful, quite influential in changing policy in the United States at the time of the Biden administration. Unfortunately, we've gone back since then, but the project itself demonstrated the power of the approach that we were using for informing action. And so let me tell you a little bit about that project. And then what happened as a result of that is that other countries came to speak with us and say, we'd like to do something like this in our countries. We think it could be quite important. And so we've started collaborating with colleagues here and others to develop similar studies in these countries. And those are still ongoing. And you'll hear about those from India, from China, and from Brazil today. So the idea broadly is to be very open and transparent about the modeling that is done for decarbonization, and do the modeling in such a way that it actually informs policy formulation and decision making. So next slide, please. Is it possible to remove that? Thank you. So this is an overview of the study. It was 9 different institutions collaborating, 18 researchers. It took us about 2 years. You can click on the QR code to get the study. It's about 350 pages with mostly graphics, very little in the way of words, because we wanted to be able to communicate effectively. So what we started with was a sort of coarse resolution optimization modeling, state-of-the-art models to say, what does the energy system in the country need to look like? Thank you. In order to reach a net zero target by 2050 for the United States. And then we did what is the most, I think the most important part of the work was what we call downscaling, which is visualizing what that coarse resolution modeling looks like at very fine resolution. And I'll show you some examples of that. But by doing this downscaling, it lets us unpack the implications for the transition of things that people care about land use, about infrastructure development, about capital requirements, jobs, health, and air pollution impacts. And so we generated a lot of maps and a lot of visually informative material. And then we took that, and unlike, I think, many academic studies, we spent a lot of time engaging with stakeholders so that they understood both how we did what we did as well as what the results showed. And ultimately, the study was quite influential, as I mentioned. So let me give you just a couple of snapshots of the some of the results that we generated. This is a example of the solar and wind electricity generation that would be required in the United States to get to net zero by 2050. On the left-hand side, you see solar and wind farms. And what I'm showing there is the annual rate of construction that would be needed under 3 different scenarios. We looked at different scenarios because different stakeholders have different visions about what the future should look like. And under any of the 3 scenarios we're showing there, we would have to be building much faster than we were at the time in the United States, both solar and wind. So that's sort of an aggregate view. It's hard to really understand what that means for most people. But if you look on the right-hand side, this is a map that was developed at a resolution of about 5 kilometers as to where could you build the solar farms and where could you build the wind farms. And we mapped this at 5-year time steps so you could see how the landscape is changing over time. And it's this type of mapping that was quite visually informative, and that's what I mean by the downscaling work that we did. And there we go. And we also modeled employment related to the energy transition, which of course most people care about is jobs. And what this shows is the state by state in the United States from 2020 to 2050, the change in employment related to the energy transition by different resource sector. And what this shows overall a very positive picture in one perspective. There are many more jobs in the energy economy with this transition. On the other hand, it's also a challenge to find those workers to do those jobs because most in the US at the time, we have virtually full employment. So it lets you think about where are the jobs, what are the impacts locally, and in some states there are job losses because they are fossil fuel dependent states. And again, that helps to sharpen the focus of policy to help support those communities that might not fare. And we also looked at air pollution again and health impacts from air pollution. And I won't go into the details, but this was done at a county by county resolution. And the most important changes in air pollution are the reduction of coal-fired power plants and the transition from gasoline internal combustion engine vehicles to electric vehicles. And you can see the picture is very positive for air pollution with the transition. So those are just a few snapshots out of the 350 pages of the report, so feel free to look in more detail. But this is sort of the timeline of the progression that went from our Net Zero America study to what we call our Net Zero X initiative, where X is China or Brazil or India or other countries. We published our report as the Biden administration was taking office. And then we did very extensive engagement with decision makers and stakeholders. My colleagues and I gave on the order of 300 briefings to Congress, to the executive branch, to private companies, to non-governmental organizations, all of the stakeholders that need to be participating in the conversation about the transition. And we also got some pretty good media attention, including international attention, which then gave us the idea that, let's see if we can do something like this with other partners in other countries. And so that led to the Net Zero X initiative. And all of the Net Zero X studies are led by local teams. Princeton is collaborating, but supporting in ways that that we have some comparative advantage, but obviously the studies need to be led locally. And this is the current map of where we are collaborating and some of the future countries we think would be quite important to engage. We're also, and these are major projects. This is a 2 to 3 year effort at a minimum, and with related resources to back that. And we are planning to have a first workshop of our global energy modeling decision support community next fall in Princeton. Just a couple of quick, more detailed slides on the modeling approach. And it's a bit different in each country, so you'll hear about some of the details, but overall, there's the 3 models in blue here, an energy demand model. What are the services that we want from energy going forward? And what are the technologies that we will use to try to meet those? And that generates a set of final energy demands that need to be supplied. And we have the dark blue modeling set called the energy supply optimization. And that is the modeling that we do at core scale, combined with land use and land use change modeling. And that middle one is especially important in Brazil, but also in other countries. And then that modeling set communicates the results to the downscaling effort, where we use a variety of different approaches to visualize, again, at politically and socially relevant scales, what the future looks like. And then in the pink box in the middle, we make a very concerted effort to be very transparent about both how the work is done and what the results are saying and all of the assumptions that go into it. And this is really important to be able to sort of democratize the conversation with stakeholders. And as well, some kind of a web-based stakeholder engagement tool. This will differ from one country to the next, but that's an important way to get a broader engagement. And then, of course, just concerted stakeholder engagement. I think I'll skip this because I want to leave time for others to give some comments, and I think I'll close with that. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Eric. Very, very nice presentation, showing that if you have comprehensive models that can be easily adapted for other countries, it will be a major step forward in the decarbonization of our society. So now I will pass the word to Ajay, who will provide examples for another important country in the world, that is India. Oh, sorry. Let's go for, sorry for my mistake. Let's go for Tiandu Peng. Also to talk about a critically important country, that is China.
Oh, hello. Okay, thank you. I'm Tiandu Peng from China. I'm associate professor at Tsinghua University, and our pavilion is nearby. Yeah. Okay, so today I will give a brief introduction about the Net Zero China project. Professor Eric Larsen has given a detailed introduction about the framework of Net Zero X, including the targets, also the framework of modeling work, and also the whole framework of the Net Zero X coordinating from different countries. So today, for China, we utilize the same framework of the modeling framework. And today I will introduce how will China team to build this modeling and how to simulate the future of China's net zero target. So for the name today is exploring pathway towards China's net zero future. This one, sorry. We know that China has announced the carbon target to achieve the carbon neutrality by 2060. And also China has a near-term and a middle-term target for the carbon emissions. For example, for China announced that it will achieve carbon peaking by 2030. And also there are some target for the installation of solar and the wind and the renewables. We know that for the new NDC announced about 1 month ago, China commits that China will, by 2035, China will reduce the economic-wide greenhouse gas emissions by about 7 point to 10 points compared to the peak level. That means that there was not only for the carbon emissions, but also for the greenhouse gas emissions. And China also have a target for the installation of the renewables by 2035. Let's move forward to the future. China announced that it will achieve the carbon neutrality target by 2060. We know that this is the target for the carbon emissions or greenhouse gas emissions, but what is the pathway? And which approach will be cost effective and will be affordable for the whole society? This is very important. So our work was to explore the future pathways towards the carbon emission, the carbon neutrality target. And here we just simulated the carbon target by 2060, but our model can simulate it different carbon target year. For example, we can simulate the carbon neutrality target year in 2050 or 2070, it's okay. But here we focus on 2060. Okay, so what will our future energy system look like? Why we focus on energy system? This is because that almost 80% of the CO2 emissions are from the energy system. And this, for our human activities, most of the CO2 emissions are also from the energy sector. So for our phase 1 project, we focus on the energy system. So for the energy system, if we want to explore the future transition pathway or the decarbonization approach for this sector, we should know 4 things. First one was the service demand. So this is because that all the energy will be utilized for our life, for our mobility, for our buildings. So we should know what the service demand will be. This is the first thing. Second thing was that if we want to meet the service demand in the future, so how much final energy we should produce. So this is the second thing. For the third thing was that where are the primary energy come from? We know that for the final energy demand for the mobility, for the building sector, we need electricity, we need hydrogen, we need gasoline. So where are they from? From renewables or from fossil energy? So this is very important. This is the third thing. The fourth thing was the downscaling. Just like what Eric said that for the future, we need a huge investment. Where will this investment to be? This is important. So we should know the infrastructure, the facilities. Also, we should know a very high resolution for the future infrastructure and the facilities for the whole energy system. So this is the 4 things for our modeling work in the phase 1. So I would give a brief introduction about the different part of these 4 things. The first one was the demand side. Just as Eric said that we will utilize the energy pathway model to analyze the future service demand and the final energy demand for China to achieve the carbon target goals. First, we should know what is the demand side. Always for our modelers, we use to separate the whole energy system as a supply side and the demand side. Demand side means that we are energy consumer. There will be many energy consumptions. Supply side means that that will supply the primary energy and convert the primary energy to a final energy. So for example, the power sector and the renewables. For demand side, it means that here we just focus on the building sector, transportation sector, and the industrial sector. We know that in United States or in Europe, transportation sector will be the largest CO2 emitter sector. But in China, industrial sector shares about I think about half of the CO2 emissions for the demand side. So this is very important in China. So in our model, the industrial sector will be a very important sector for us. For each sector, for example, for building sector, we will separate, there will be about 6 subsectors. For example, heating, cooling, lighting, and and the special heating. So for the transporting sector, there will be more than 10 subsectors. For example, the passenger vehicle, the freight vehicles, also two wheels, and subways, railways, and aviation. So for the industrial sector, we know that China owns I think the largest capacity for the manufacturing. So here there will be about 40 subsectors. For example, the food, beverage, also clothes, and iron, steel, and aluminum. So about 40 subsectors. For all these subsectors, we will utilize energy pathways to analyze the future service demand and analyze the future final energy demand. Another very important thing is that first, we should know the long-term demand for our service and energy. We should know the annually or hourly demand. This is because that demand side, the energy demand side, for example, for the power sector, this is important for the supply side. For example, the supply side not only need to meet the long-term balance of the demand and supply, but also need to meet the balance hourly. For example, for the power, there are the flexibilities for the system. So we should know the energy demand in an hourly level or annual level. So this is very important. So we should know the load curve for the consumers. Second sector was the supply sector based on the macro model. And this is a very comprehensive and very complex model that has been built by Princeton University. But now we are doing the localization work to build the macro China model. For this model, that the demand side model will be an input. For example, the demand side will provide the parameters for the price demand of different final energy, for example, for power, and also for other fields. So the macro model will simulate the whole supply side based on cost effective. For example, how to achieve this system based on the most cost effective ways. And also we should know the storage, the pipeline, the network for this system. Another important thing, just like Erica said, that not only the energy are very important, also what will happen for the energy system will impact the social economics. For example, the employment, the GDP growth, also the air pollution. So this is also very important issues for China. So based on this supply side model, we also will analyze the future air pollutions, the future employment, and the future economic growth based on this supply side model. But also this will couple with the demand side. The third important thing is about the outflow sector, agriculture, forest, and land use. This can be seen as a demand side and supply side because it is an energy consumption sector, because energy will be utilized, for example, for the agriculture, also for the forest. Also, the forest will supply the biomass, and it's a carbon sink. So we should know, so how many biomass feedstock can be supplied from this sector, and what was the carbon emissions from this sector. So this is very important for the whole system. And the other thing, another very important thing was the storyline. So the storyline for the future. We know that the scenario analysis is a very important tool for us to know or to analyze the future map of our life. So for our model now in the phase 1, we just set three key core scenarios, three main scenarios. All these three scenarios, the key assumption for is that electrification will be the key approach for the demand side. But for the supply side, we have three different approaches. For example, for the reference, it means that the energy system development under the current policy, for example, the carbon peaking policy and the China 1+N policy system. For the E+ scenario, it means that renewables rollout rate almost unconstrained. Also, for the E+ with AI, we know that AI will be very important in our life, not only in demand side, but also in supply side. It will improve the energy efficiency, but it will increase the energy demand. So this is the key scenarios for net zero China, but also for the E+ scenario, also have 3 sub-scenarios. This is because that if for the future power supply, maybe renewable may be the most important one. But if we consider the energy security, we consider the the stable supply for the renewables, maybe nuclear and fossil energy will also play a very important role in the future energy system. So we consider 3 sub-scenarios to analyze what will happen. For example, full renewables, always part of nuclear, always part of coal or natural gas. So this is the basic scenario analysis. Yeah. So the last important thing was the downscaling. This is what I said before, and Eric said that we should know where will be the facilities and where will be the infrastructures. So this is important not only for the policymakers, but also for the financial and the investment. So currently we have to do this work on a provincial level, but in the future we will move this provincial level to the high resolution. For example, 5 kilometers or 10 kilometers. This is very important. So the last thing we will introduce our team. This is the phase 1 for China, net zero China team. The researchers and the advisors are from, for example, energy sectors, policies, also AFLU, and also from, for example, environment sectors. So this is for phase 1. And in the future, maybe more and more researchers will join us, because that we know net zero is a huge and complex work for all of us. So thank you. This is a brief introduction. Yeah.
Thank you very much for this very comprehensive approach to change the energy system in China. It's very, very impressive. So now let's see the example of India, another critically important country.
Thank you very much. It was a pleasure to be part of this global study. And I must confess that while I am not a part of the actual study group, I have the honor of chairing the advisory committee for this project, and so know a little more about it than I would otherwise. So first of all, why did we do this? When we look at, so India's announced that we will go net zero by 2070. That's what the goal is, which means that the electricity sector becomes net zero by 2050 or 2060. We can achieve it. However, what it does mean is that the many issues related to the sustainable development goals, particularly those related to jobs, particularly those related to air quality, remain unfulfilled. That is the way where we are going now. The second thing that we did was to look at the kinds of mitigation pathways that we have to reach the net zero, the kinds of developmental outcomes it can have, and I'll come into the differences between the mitigation pathway and the development pathway. They could be different, but hopefully they could be the same as well. What are the kinds of trade-offs that result in this, whether you get more jobs, whether you get more mitigation, whether you get more air pollution or less air pollution? And what are the kinds of policy levers, particularly those related to, for example, the allocation of technology or capital, that will lead to these kinds of outcomes? So with the modeling framework we used was something very similar to what has been used by China and by the US, where we first looked at the demand, and our partners in this are the Priyas Energy Group, hence the Priyas Integrated Energy System, the PIER. And then what happens is we disaggregate it, because it does depend the land issue. As we will come to in a moment, land turns out to be the major constraint. And therefore, what are the kinds of trade-offs associated with land will come as the next step, and hence the downscaling of it into bite-sized pieces that we can handle becomes important. Finally, what are the kinds of skills needed? And therefore, a survey of the workforce, both of today as well as of tomorrow, and of the kinds of places that are available, particularly, and this is an important issue, particularly where biodiversity is concerned. Not that long ago, there was a particular bird, the great Indian bustard, which is found in the northwest part of India, that was under threat. And consequently, the Supreme Court put 1 million square kilometers out of this renewables area. They said you can have renewables, but no overhead lines. It'll have to be underground lines. That makes it very expensive. And therefore, the key issue became, how do you manage the trade-off between land on the one side and biodiversity on the other? Yet another trade-off that came out. So what we've looked at are 3 scenarios. And these 3 scenarios on the fact that, one, we go all the way on mitigation. In other words, ensure that the goals are. The second, that we go on development, ensure that the sustainable development goals are achieved. And which I said, hopefully will come together in the synthetic view. Now, I am relatively simple-minded, and therefore, to me, the way these things were different, what was the cost of delivered energy? If the cost of delivered energy was less than the cost of fossil fuel-based energy, then it became synergistic. If it did not, then it went the development way. If you kept high prices, but you forced the investment into renewables, well, that became the mitigation pathway. So these are the 3 systems-based scenarios that we are looking at. This obviously has a lot of stakeholders involved. We developed an advisory group which consists of the various parts of the group, but also the stakeholders, and consequently use this as a sounding board in whatever we do. So one of the issues that happened was that if you notice that the greatest energy demand increase is in the residential sector and to some extent in the industry sector. This is important because what it tells us is that these are the areas where growth is occurring and will continue to occur. This, therefore, tells of both the technology interventions that are needed as well as the kinds of investment decisions and the nudges that are needed in order to move from the current technology base to the new technology base. So, looking at all of this, the answer was very, very clear. As I said earlier, the true trade-off is in land versus renewables. So today what happens is that when renewables are built, the renewable developer and the owner of the land get into one-to-one agreements. This leads to all kinds of problems and is also the reason why the formal upscaling is not occurring. The upscaling essentially occurs when there is a government push. This is despite the fact that last year in 2024, we found prices of round-the-clock electricity, renewable electricity, solar plus wind plus storage, which were less than the cost of coal-based electricity. And price and things that were formed, renewables and coal that came into existence at the same time in 2024. Yet we see that upscaling is a problem. And as I said earlier, the upscaling is because of land, which is the largest problem, but also because it takes 4 years to build a transmission line, as opposed to 2 years that it takes to build a renewable energy plant. And even though the cost of electricity is less for solar plus wind plus storage, the problem is that the investment cost is almost double. And if the investment cost is double, it means that at scale, you need to find more investment money. Okay. So now we looked at where is it that we can locate this, taking into account the siting issues and taking into account the investment issues. So this tells you of the areas in which it is possible. So solar, wind, and we looked also at the land costs in these as proxies of the value that people associate with land. And it tells you that the places where, for example, solar is done, if you can get the state to be involved in establishing the kinds of contracts, the people would be happy to provide land at costs that are competitive. On the other hand, what we also looked at was the transmission costs. And here the challenge becomes, how do you make sure that you've got adequate capacity of transmission lines from the places where you've got the development of renewable energy occurring? Because it makes no sense to have a separate line for solar, a separate line for wind, and a separate line for batteries, because each of them works with a capacity utilization factor of 30%. On the other hand, if you can locate it all together, then you've got a capacity factor of 90%, which makes the line a lot more viable than it would be otherwise. So as we look to the future, we are looking at about, approximately this time next year, at the next COP, we should be able to present the deep dives that we're talking about the spectral resolution, and talking about the sectoral views on how the demand will develop. We will also be ready with the kinds of challenges, both in terms of employment and in terms of the air pollution, the kinds of skills development that would be needed. The final report and the briefings associated with it would occur after that. So we look forward to getting together with you next year when we discuss these in greater detail. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Ajay, for this comprehensive plan. So now we'd like to invite David to discuss about the Brazilian implementation of this model.
Hello all, thank you. My name is David. I'm project manager at the Institute for Energy and the Environment. And I'm here representing a lot of institutions that are involved in this project, in this initiative in Brazil. So we have a set of 4 think tanks or NGOs. There are experts in monitoring emissions and have done some work on projecting emissions on prescriptive scenarios for zero carbon trajectory. And we are also co-leading this initiative with the University of Campinas, Unicamp, and universities abroad, Instituto Dom Luiz, University of Lisboa, the Princeton University, and University of Minnesota. So we are still at the early stages in Brazil. We have started this project 6 months ago, but we're very excited for 3 reasons. So the first reason is that we can contribute to the group, to the small community in Brazil that we have for modeling zero emission pathways. So we have the group working in Rio, Universidade Federal do Rio de Janeiro, with Professor Schaffer, that has been working closely with the Brazilian government in proposing the Brazilian trajectories, and they have proposed a net zero trajectory for 2050. Also in the Climate Observatory, the four organizations are part of the Climate Observatory. We have proposed a prescriptive scenario for net zero in 2045. And most recently, we have Professor Carlos Nobre and others proposing a net zero for 2040. So we're very excited in this project, as the other countries have shown, we can analyze different scenarios for different timeframes. The second reason we're excited is to be part of this network, so we can use the very front science of modeling. And the third is that we truly believe that visualizing in the territory, the downscaling is key to put into action what the models are showing us. And in Brazil, we have three challenges that are different from the other countries that I would like to highlight. So in Brazil, we have land use and agriculture as a really big chunk of the emissions. So we have 42% of emissions in Brazil due to deforestation today. We have 30% of emissions due to agriculture, mainly because of cattle raising. And that's a very hard to abate sector because it's very widespread into farms. And the energy sector only accounts for 20% of emissions. And besides that, we also have a huge opportunity of lying within restoration of lands. We have a mandate of restoring 20 million hectares of land that was degraded. And currently, the current regeneration of vegetation already accounts for an offset of 30%. So we have a 30% offset in carbon removals from the atmosphere from land restoration. And that certainly can play a huge role in the future if Brazil pursues the zero deforestation policy and also works on more forest recovery. So that's why the land use change team is very big, and it's like the same size as the energy and industry and waste team. So next one, where do I point? Okay. So we're still in the initial stages, and one of the challenges is how to integrate all of the sectoral models. So land use change, agriculture, and energy. And currently, we are working with the MAGPIE model from Potsdam, where we will have as output coarse scale land use according to scenarios for food production, GDP growth, and also climate change. And that will be downscaled using the SEALS model, calibrated by MapBiomas, which is a Brazilian land use monitoring platform that gives, by analyzing satellite data, MapBiomas classifies the territory within 30 meters per 30 meters squares pixels. We have the classification of the land. And for the energy sector, we will basically follow what the other countries are also doing, following the energy demand model using energy pathways and optimization model using macro. But here we also have the challenge to integrate macro into SEALS, because we will have to have a very integrated vision on land use. since we will have to, at the same time, comply with our restoration objectives, our zero deforestation. Biofuels should play a very important role, and that demands land, and solar power that also demands land. So that integration will be key for our modeling in Brazil. We are lucky to have Tasso on our advisory board, who's put us the last challenge after all of these technical challenges, that is to build a tool that will give full transparency for the modeling and allow anyone to play with scenarios, and so that other proposals of trajectories can be compared in the same framework. And next one. Okay, thank you. So just to give you some very quick, very preliminary results, not real results on, they haven't been reviewed yet, but just we are learning how to operate the models. So we have run the downscaling for the land use change using the SEALS model calibrated by MapBioma's data. And what we are able to do now is to produce a map of land use classes on a 300-meter scale. So while MAGPIE gives us the land use at 0.5 degrees, which is roughly 100 kilometers, we are downscaling it to 300 meters. And the goal is to have it by 30 meters. So it will be pretty accurate if we can reach that goal. For the energy sector, we have modeled the transportation sector using feeding the energy pathways with previous models that the teams already had worked on the past. As I said, bioenergy will play definitely, it's challenging because we are such a big country. We are dealing with different geographies, different vocation areas for different crops. And we have the issue of seasonality of the plantations. So this is a great improvement that we will have to be taken into account by developing upon the macro model. And some last preliminary results that we have is what will feed into the macro system is the candidate areas for solar system. So in this map, you can see the levelized cost of energy for solar according to the potential of solar incidence and distance to the current existing infrastructure of transmission and distribution. So this is just an example that will be fed into the macro modeling. And also we will have one of these for wind and biofuels and so on. So we wish that by the first semester, we have the first round of reviewed results that can be shared publicly. And for next COP, we wish that we will have the first version of the tool, then that we can, everybody can play with that and visualize the results. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Davi, for the plans for the Brazilian component. And now, at the dynamics of the panel, we will exchange the people here. And I would like to invite Mr. Suman Chandra.
She had to leave because
Oh, she left.
the Brazilian and the Indian negotiators are getting their heads together.
Okay, that's more important. Really nice. So I would like to invite Mr. Zhang, that is Vice President of Institute of Climate Change and Sustainable Development of Tsinghua University, Mr. Leandro Cardoso, Deputy General Coordination of the Department of Mitigation Policy and Implementation Instruments in the Brazilian Minister of Environment. So I think that the task now is you to provide your comments on what we heard about the three different exercises that are important for all our countries. Please.
Thank you so much, moderator. So you will speak together with me, right? Yeah, okay. So I'll keep my comments very brief. So first of all, I would like to thank Princeton University, particularly Professor Larson, for providing the fundamental modeling framework to the partners. I think that laid a very solid foundation for this very unique approach to work together. So this is extremely important. I think I also want to thank my colleagues from Tsinghua University from China, and of course from all the presenters from Brazil, from India, and from the US. You know, they have, especially my colleagues, I know that they have been working very hard over the past year and a half to enrich the platform, the modeling platform, and also by localizing and putting in country-specific data into the modeling so that we can have a truly global access and open source modeling system. So I think this is my first point. So the second point would be this is a modeling collaboration, but it's no longer, you know, it's not only a modeling. So I think it is a value added to the multilateralism that especially at the moment that we are facing the 10th anniversary of the Paris Agreement. And if you look at the past 10 years, we see the Paris Agreement is effective, is resilient, but it's also faced so many challenges, right? So I think this particular collaboration, this partnership, focusing on modeling, but also beyond the modeling, it's itself a great contribution to the Paris Agreement and to the multilateralism under the Paris Agreement. So this is my second point. And my final point is getting practical. If we look across the hall, it's another pavilion. It's the GEUC pavilion. We call the Global Alliance of Universities on Climate. So it's a university-led coalition, but it's run and operate primarily by young people, by students from 15 universities. We also have a very similar program we call, this is Net Zero X, right? So we have Climate X program for the students. So I think I will call for a collaboration between Net Zero X and Climate X. So this year, for example, Climate X is online educational program. It reached to universities in over 80 countries. And those students are extremely enthusiastic about climate change, but also relatively highly educated about the knowledge of climate change. So I think if we can bring the findings of this modeling collaboration into the course, for example, next year in July till October, we'll have the 2026 Climate X campaign program. So I will be very delighted to support this kind of a collaboration. So finally, I think at Tsinghua University, we are extremely committed to support this collaboration. And so we'll do whatever we can and do our best to promote this collaboration. So with that, I thank you for your attention. Yeah. That's okay. Hello.
First, I would like to thank the Professor Stasio Azevedo, Eric Larson, David Tsai, Chandu Peng, Ajay, Mahur for the invitation, and greet my other colleagues in the panel. I'm very happy to see how the Net Zero initiative has evolved since we met last year in Princeton. As a public policy officer, myself, I will briefly comment the initiative from the perspective of how those models and the scientific evidence that they produce can be best used to inform climate policy decisions. Let me introduce, for those who doesn't know, the fact that the Brazilian second NDC submitted by Brazil to the UNFCCC last year was informed by evidence produced by an integrated assessment model called Brazilian Land Use and Energy Systems, BLUES, which was created and developed by the University of Rio de Janeiro. The lessons that we learned from this process might be useful for you in the near future. First, the first lesson that we had was that an integrated assessment model can provide the big picture of mitigation trajectories, following the most cost-effective path to the whole economy, but its results must be contrasted or complemented by sectoral models which are more detailed and specialized in terms of technological costs and maturity than an integrated assessment model. In practice, this means that climate policy making process should encompass, at least in my viewpoint, two groups of evidence from the whole economy and sectoral detailed evidence. Secondly, defining premises and scenarios for the modeling exercises is perhaps the most important stage of this process. Moreover, the definition of those parameters must involve not only government officials and scientists, but also a broad range of stakeholders from civil society organizations to the private sector. And they must be broadly publicized and transparent. This consensus is extremely important because when the results come out, they must be the focus, not the premises and scenarios themselves. Going back and forth with that will cost more money and time from all of us. Thirdly, climate policies are essentially development policies, especially for developing countries such as Brazil, China, and India. Therefore, decision-making will never be solely based on mitigation trajectories and ambition, but also have to be compatible with economic development and equity in the short and long terms. So those models must also be able to estimate socioeconomic impacts over time in GDP, investment, employment rates, interest rates, prices, trade balancing, among other economic variables. If they also encompass territorial specialized impacts at the local or macro-regional levels, such as the net zero model here presented by the professors, the better will be. That is a great achievement of the model because policymakers would be able to decide based on detailed territorial impacts and take action in order to minimize negative local or regional impacts or enhance positive impacts. Finally, the modeling process must present at the end a comprehensive results report, presenting not only the different results for different scenarios, but also the possible trade-offs between mitigation, ambition, and socioeconomic impacts. In this way, all stakeholders would have the information needed to inform their own perspective on which should be the path to be taken to reach its mitigation goals, especially the net zero goal, which in the Brazilian case is set up to happen in 2050. Also, policymakers will only make better informed decisions if they have the full picture on possible mitigation trajectories, related socioeconomic and territorial impacts, and their trade-offs. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So now it's time to open up. I will invite the partners back, the presenters back. So now I invite you to exchange pieces again. And then we will open up the discussions and questions and points for the audience on this very critically important issue. Please.
Thank you so much. I'm Catherine Jambala with UNDP, and I was invited by Professor Larson here. We're sitting on the plane coming here from Sao Paulo and talked about it, and I said, of course, I'm going to come and listen because it's so interesting. My question was first about the policy, but I think the gentleman who just talked about the policy and the involvement of the policymakers in the process. I heard that for you, Professor Larson, once you did it, you did a lot of briefing also. And I saw in China that you, no, it was not China, it was Delhi, India. You had in your steering committee members of the government, but I didn't see that much in China. So I was wondering, to what extent are you planning to get the policymakers involved in the process? Are you going to wait until you have the results to present it to them? So I will want to know in China, what will be the role of the policymakers? My second question is about, to what extent can this be applied to adaptation? Or is it just like totally not suited for that? Thanks.
Okay, I think.
Me first.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you for your question. This is very important for us to, we know that our modern work, what's really the role, what is the value for our modern work? Yeah, this is important. Currently, now this is in the initial stage. Now we just do the modern work. How to conclude, how to include the policy, for example, implications is very important. And currently now in our scenario, first for the policy, we will try to break down the policy or target from the policymakers into our scenario to analyze how this policy will impact the future pathway. Second thing was that we hope to, from the result, to tell the policymakers whether this policy will be, suitable or be valuable for our energy system. So this is very important. But now it's difficult for me to tell you that how will this result will impact the policymakers. For I think for the second question, I think not for me.
Yeah, the second point was about adaptation. How these tools can help the countries to better adapt to the new climate.
Okay, for adaptation, to be honest, in our modern work now, we just consider the mitigation, how to reduce the carbon emission. This is the most important thing for our research currently. But I think adaptation is important for us to analyze in our framework. For example, currently for the energy demand side, we will consider how will the extreme weather will impact the energy demand. For example, it's very hot, so the air conditioners will be utilized more frequently. This will impact the energy demand. And also, this will also impact the power grid. This is because the kilowatt, the peak power will increase. So adaptation, another important thing for the adaptation in our framework is that, for example, for the infrastructure, this will impact the output of the load curve of the PV. For example, because the extreme weather will impact the renewables. For example, the weather. How to adapt to this stream is important. In our current framework, we will set several parameters to reflect the adaptation. But I think maybe there will be many, there'll be more results, or be more implementations for the future for the adaptations. But currently, we focus on the mitigation. Thank you.
As far as adaptation is concerned, the kinds of challenges are very different. So this kind of a modeling effort would not work. So let me tell you, this is based on the example that we have of the impacts on the petroleum sector. So what we did was we looked at the kinds of impacts that there were, whether it was droughts, or whether it was floods, or whether it was cyclones. And we did a map of the country. And what we came out with was risk assessments. And therefore, there is, just as you have tons of carbon on this side, you have risk assessments on the adaptation side. That's number one. Number two, yes, you need to bring in the policymakers early, because what it implies is two things. One is, it's not that more money is needed, but that money needs to be spent differently. And second, people need to be skilled differently in order to be able to do those kinds of risk assessments before taking on a project.
On the question of adaptation, I agree the optimization modeling is not appropriate, but the visualization at the level of downscale, that's the way I took your question, it's even more important in the case of adaptation. It's a good question. We haven't thought about how to do that, but it's related to risk assessment, as you said, Ajay. And there are folks who think about that, but it would be interesting to get a net zero adaptation project going or something.
Yeah, the issue of adaptation, even at discussions at COP, is very much delayed in terms of the mitigation. And you needed to keep up, with adaptation, because we needed to adapt for last decade changes in climate change, and that's very nice you raise this issue. So, any other question?
If I can follow up on the, I noticed, I think from your presentation, you have health issues, right? Health consideration, like how climate change is damaging people's health. I think that is one of the adaptation goals under GCA, the global goals on adaptation. I think this COP will produce 100 indicators, which are measurable indicators. I think probably you already, it's not zero consideration, but I think if you have considered health into your modeling, then that's already part of adaptation efforts. Yeah.
Yeah, really good. Yes. Well remembered. So thank you very much. It's time to move to other activities. Thank you very much for your presence in this very relevant.